Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast daily and welcome back to the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. That is Bill Landis, Jeremy Birmingham, and I am Austin Ward. We are deep into camp season and recruiting season, and Ohio State's making some moves.
Finally, for those of you out there wondering, when is Ohio State going to get another defensive commitment?
It's me, I'm one of
Bill's one of those. Buckeyes did add commitment number 3 on the defensive side of the ball on Monday night. Jalen McLean, 4-star by most people's metric, safety from New Jersey. 6'1", 200, runs a 4.5, does all the things. And that's really what you're looking for. You're looking for just guys who can understand where they can play multiple spots, safety-driven defense.
Oh, really?
A guy that can play all 3 safety spots, but Jalen McLean, I think, is more of the guy that you can put in the Lathan Ransom type Jordan Fuller role. You just let him kind of play some center field and be that safety. You know?
What is it about New Jersey safeties?
They're smart, number one. Jalen McLean, very, very bright kid, super high football IQ. That's something that really drew the attention of Perry Aliano when he started recruiting him like 6 months ago. Interestingly enough, Ohio State offered this kid 3 weeks after he released a top 10 list back in February, and the Buckeyes weren't on it. So then they offered, and then he visited a month later, and now here we are 2 months later after his official visit this weekend. He's committed. So we're killing some boogaboos here for Ohio State, because last summer the official visit weekends didn't really go the way people wanted them to go, and we see a little bit of positive momentum coming off of this big weekend that they just had. 15 official visitors. McLean the first to commit. Could see a couple more from this weekend for sure.
Is that when I saw it pop, that was not a name that was front of mind for me in terms of the kind of bigger fish out there for Ohio State defensively, but is he a guy they've kind of long thought of as a, I don't know, nearish top of the board kind of guy?
His national ranking makes it weird, I think, because there are some networks that have him as the number 7 ranked safety in the country. There are others. Rivals.com has him as number 47 safety in the country. So there is a wide gap here, and I think it just comes from who's actually seen him in person and who hasn't. I don't know what sort of precludes that big of a gap, but from the first time that I heard about him from the Ohio State staff, it's been he's a guy they want. And you've seen them make some decisions to move on from other safeties that they were recruiting earlier and really start to narrow in on a few, and McLean was one. And then you have the others coming into town today. Monday, Zaquan Patterson, now a 5-star on Rivals.com, arrives in Columbus from Chaminade Madonna High School in Florida. He gets here today. We'll be here today and Tuesday. And then this week, you have 5-stars Peyton Woodyard, 5-star KJ Bolden, both into town. So much of the focus has been on those guys that I don't think, you're going to take at least 3 safeties in this class. So if you could get a trio that involves McLean and then Woodyard and Patterson, or Bolden and Patterson, or that's the sweet spot they're really aiming for.
So I should not, because when stuff like this happens sometimes, and granted, I am not as in tune with the day-to-day of everything as you are, and I know a lot of fans are. I see that name pop, and I'm like, okay, does this mean that something changed with Bolden and Woodyard? That is not necessarily the case?
No, I mean, okay. I think what is probably more indicative of things changing is that on Monday we saw a crystal ball for Reggie Powers from Centerville to Michigan State. That, after an official visit, he took there this weekend, and that's where I think most people had sort of penciled him into one of these spots, and that is now gone. So I don't think really anything changes really for Woodyard or Bolden. And what doesn't change is that both of those guys are still relative long shots, all things considered, because of their current situation, with KJ Bolden being down the road from Georgia and Peyton Woodyard being committed to Georgia for 6 months. Both those guys have already had their official visits in Athens, however. So that's where things get interesting. From talking to some people, there was a major push by Georgia this past weekend with KJ Bolden on campus to get him to commit, shut things down. And turns out Georgia's really good at this, and he didn't do it. And so that is at least encouraging from an Ohio State perspective. Similar, I think, in some ways to what we saw last summer with Caleb Downs, where Georgia had him on campus and said, how many times have you been here? And I don't know, 3,000. Okay, why haven't you committed? I'm just not ready. And if Georgia's doing that and you're not ready, then it at least opens up the door that maybe there's a chance. And that's what I think Ohio State's clinging to as they move toward this weekend.
So I remember last summer the major conversation with Downs, at least in terms of Ohio State, was, the defense wasn't proven yet and nobody knew how it was going to work. I wonder, 1 year is not going to
dramatically change everything. There was, there were certainly signs of improvement, but not a finished product. But I wonder, I don't know, Bill and I, there's no way that we can really know if the guys have changed their minds a year ago, but it does seem the proof of concept is more out there for Ohio State's defense and their recruiting on that side of the ball this summer.
Yeah, I mean, you would think so. And, I've written before at OhioState.Rivals.com about some of the statistical improvements they made last year. I don't know how much that part of it actually matters. It's just like, do you watch Ohio State play defense on a Saturday and think to yourself, like, man, that looks like it's fun to play in? And I think that Ohio State showed a lot of that last fall. So it's probably too early to say that they're really cashing in on that, but it does feel like that it is a bit more of a known commodity, I guess, at the moment.
It's on film.
Yeah.
And now you can at least take kids into an official visit, show them film and say, this is your spot. Whereas a summer ago in Jim Knowles' defense, they couldn't do that. Now, there will, of course, be the naysayers, be like, yeah, but they gave up 87 points to Michigan and Georgia back-to-back. And that's where you go, okay, who cares? That's a recruiting pitch, actually. Well, actually, if you were here, we could have done this. If you were here, we could have done this. If we would have had a more athletic safety here, we could have done this. So that's not something that's going to be working against Ohio State. What really they needed is to show it on film and say, this is what we're doing, and this is where you fit in. Because it is so multiple at safety, and they do use certain players for multiple roles. They have to be able to pinpoint with someone and say, this is your spot, and now they can do that a little bit more easily. But you can also, like I said, turn around and say, and last year we struggled here because this guy wasn't fast enough, but you're faster and more pretty.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a pretty good pitch to me. If you want to read more about this camp at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, we were all here, and Berm has a ton of stuff coming in a notebook at ohiostate.rivals.com. Look for that. I would say generally it was probably not the, most important camp at Ohio State of all time. There was this 6'5" defensive end. He currently plays for a team in Washington, the Commanders.
Stupid name.
That seemed to command most of the attention.
Do you think that's why they named it Commanders?
It very well could be.
I hadn't thought of it that way.
So I ask you.
Chase Young's pretty good. So
Yeah. Obviously, he's not coming back, but he did come watch a bunch of defensive line drills, chat with Larry Johnson, take pictures. Where is Chase on the power rankings of most influential, impactful Ohio State NFL players that when they come out here for a camp, who would move the needle more than Chase Young?
I think at this point,
for a defensive player,
any current
Justin Fields definitely would.
Feel free, please. We didn't mean to take up all the room here.
Yeah, you did.
I did
No, we did mean to actually.
Actually did.
Justin Fields, I think for sure would be number one on that list. The receivers, like
Garrett Wilson got a pretty good response when he came back for the spring game.
I think Chris Olave is there too. Like, I don't know, like Terry McLaurin, is he up there? Chase is probably, I don't know, maybe third. I maybe go like Justin Garrett and Chase.
Justin Garrett and Chase. Okay.
Am I missing somebody? Oh, I guess I didn't. The Bosa's.
Yeah, I mean the Bosa's are sort of like mysterious figures. Like if you see them, it's weird. Like
I don't even think a lot, even like diehard football players here, will like recognize a Bosa,
which is crazy because like if Nick Bosa were like more healthy so far throughout his career, like if you're having a conversation about best players in the NFL, he's in it. Yeah, but I think you're right. Yeah,
I would say Justin is certainly number one on that level. Just recency bias, number one. The premier position at quarterback, number two. He's just got like a aura about him that I think draws people. And CJ will get that same response next year. I mean, CJ would be in that conversation for sure. But the response that Garrett got at the spring game was pretty big. I mean, Jeremiah Smith, like, is that Garrett Wilson? Like, when the number one player in the country is like, oh, is that Garrett Wilson? Like, and then Garrett Wilson goes, oh, is that Jeremiah Smith? Like, that's pretty cool.
I guess I asked because sometimes it's hard to tell. Ohio State puts out all the graphics. They know how much money the developed here mantra is generating at the next level for Buckeyes. But like, when guys are making their decisions, I never know beyond like, oh, hey, that's cool. That's the Predator right there. That guy was a Heisman Trophy finalist. Like everyone wanted their picture taken. And I mean, there weren't a ton of guys who could actually commit to Ohio State on this field on Monday. But does it actually tip the scales that much? I never know for sure.
It matters. I mean, it's all about branding, and you can see the way that players' eyes light up. And to a much lesser degree, I mean, I was watching the quarterbacks. Monday was not a good quarterback day here at Ohio State. There was not any players that I would say like are imminently like targets of Ohio State. It was a 2027 from California. I know it's crazy going into his freshman year. He was pretty good at
2027
at 6'5" and like 175 pounds, and he threw the ball really well. Whatever, that's apropos of nothing. But even like Ryan Day's watching the quarterbacks, and you could see them all pucker up immediately and tighten up. So when you are a defensive lineman working out here and Chase Young is watching you, I think it changes. Like you guys go just a little bit harder and try to be a little bit more impressive. And generally, anyone who's played sports knows that the more you try to like do something big, the more you screw up. So
yeah, it does make me wonder. Like I've basically only ever covered Ohio State. I know, Austin, you've covered some other programs. Like, is it normal for guys of, especially like of that stature, to just kind of come back as regularly as they do? Like sometimes you're walking through here, whether it's a big game like in the shoe or like the Notre Dame game was crazy, but even like in a random day in the middle of the summer, like Chase Young is here. It's kind of cool. Does it happen at other places? I don't know.
Not really. No. I mean,
Notre Dame game had me freaking out, and I was like, I've been here for 10 years.
Yeah.
I remember, it was like Peyton Manning would come back to Tennessee a lot when I was covering the team.
To see Kenny Chesney, probably, because we probably had concerts going on.
Yeah, he's a huge fan.
They have great concerts.
We can talk about that on a different show and in a different rating for the show, perhaps. But, he loved being in Knoxville, and he gave a bunch of money back to the program and was like sort of a shadow AD for a little while. So that was a little bit different, but there still weren't a ton of others. Like there weren't people that came back and lived in Knoxville. There were a couple that did radio shows, but there weren't a ton of guys fresh into the NFL that were coming back just to see their position coach. The way that happens a lot with Larry Johnson, not just with Chase Young, but virtually every one of the rushmen, except for sometimes, Nick and Joey, I don't think have spent a ton of time coming back here with the Bosas, but you see that with Paris Campbell, and we've seen that in spring with Terry McLaurin and Johnny Dixon and KJ Hill and Austin Mack and everyone on down the road there. But I don't think it's that common, Bill. I'm not saying it doesn't happen anywhere else, but to the level that it does at Ohio State, I do think that it is a little uncommon.
Yeah, I mean, even today you saw Mike Weber was here on Monday. He brought
Braxton Miller.
Braxton Miller. I mean, that's kind of like some star power just walking around the sideline on a crappy Monday afternoon. Mike brought down some kids from Cass Tech, where he's from in Detroit, to camp, and as he's preparing for the XFL, like they're still playing football. So it's just kind of neat to see. And like I said, I mean, the Notre Dame game was an exception that even like people who've been here forever are like, oh my gosh.
Well, yeah, but a game day is a little bit different than a Monday.
I've never seen it like that. That was crazy.
But we see that a lot for the
I bet
rivalry
Youngstown
game.
State's similar.
Yeah, well, maybe Jim Tressel will be there.
Pelini and Tressel.
Yeah. Oh, you think Bo will be there?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Star power.
I was talking about Carl.
Oh, I thought you're not foe.
I hope not him.
But, on a day like today, it is still important, though, because you have a player like five-star Jordan Davison, number one running back in the country in the class of 2025. We probably didn't do a great job setting up here in this spot. Oops, it happens. The number one ranked player in this position in the 2025 class, to see a former player like Mike Weber coming back and being close with his position coach, and it's been how many years? 4 years, 5 years since Mike Weber left. So, that matters. It's unbelievable. It's been 5 years since Mike Weber left. It matters to those guys, and the parents see that, and they realize, okay, this coach actually cares about my son. And then you see Chase working with Larry Johnson still, and any defensive ends who are here going, wow, this guy's still coming back here. It must mean something. Aside from just the star power of like oogling and ogling people, like, oh, that's awesome. It actually does have a value beyond just being cool.
Yeah, because you can. I mean, I'm sure when the kids come through here on business, they talk about those lasting relationships. But I'm like, every place, I'm sure, talks about it. To be able to actually see it, particularly a guy of Chase's stature, I think really can hit home. And like you said, like I'm sure it happens other places. I'm not trying to do the thing where like it only happens here, but this is all I've ever seen, and like it continues to be very cool to me.
Part of that, I think, is Columbus is a place where a lot of people still live. But if you look at like this past weekend at USC, they only had 2 official visitors, and they had Kingston Viamasa and Peyton Woodyard. Those are the only 2 guys they had on their officials, and they had the entire coaching staff with those guys. But then they had Troy Polamalu, and like that coaching staff wasn't there, so it rings a little hollow to me. It's cool if you bring in former players, but if those players didn't actually play for those coaches, I don't think that it's the same sort of message that you're sending.
Well, they have to have someone who can explain the traditions of the school because the coaches don't actually know it. I mean, that's
It was like
That's
Palomalo was like, back when I was here, we played this thing called defense. Now let's introduce Alex Grinch.
here's Alex Grinch. Come on down.
I saw Oklahoma was doing photo shoots with the Heisman trophies that were won by the guy who's not the coach anymore.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's great.
I mean, Florida doing the jump man. Folks, if you're on the Twitter or any other social media platform, find the video of the recruit at Florida on Friday night doing a photo shoot, doing a jump man pose, wearing cleats on plexiglass for some reason.
So stupid.
When he landed, he did the full-on splits, and
He's very lucky he didn't get hurt.
the recruiting world is just taking on such a bizarre odor.
Also, that's why it's really, really stupid to put a basketball player on your football jersey.
Oh, I'm just putting two and two together now. I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, jump man.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
but you're
but you
feel
can
free to walk through.
Go right ahead.
We're going to stand here all day. The longer the video goes, the more money we make.
He knows. Greetings, YouTube.
That's actually not true, YouTube. The longer the video goes, it's
If they made it,
It's how many of you are still.
if they made it to
watching.
this point, you've already got them. All right,
How
just
many
let
of
it
them
go.
are still
That's
watching.
Yeah, well, I hope all of them, and I hope they come back to watch the Horseshoe Lounge at Roosters later on Tuesday. Yes, that's going to be coming one day late because we were here on a Monday covering Ohio State's recruiting camp. We have more coverage of camp on Wednesday and Thursday at Ohio State. Bill's going to write more. You got any of those left? What do we got?
Two more.
You got any more position preview?
I sure do. Corners and safeties.
Okay, those are still coming.
And then I'm going to rank all position groups by the ones I feel best about.
Start over and do it all again.
Start over, do it all over again. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. And then I'll do a little something called You'll See. That's all coming at Ohio State.Rivals and on the podcast all week as we get through June. That's Bill and Burham. I'm Austin. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you later.